heaven? All right, good, good. It wasn't Sandy who put you to sleep last week, it was me, I'm sure. So I'm going to try to do better this week, except I got a different topic today, and so there's no PowerPoint. It's just me, and hopefully the Lord, because I want to talk about, get ready for it, I know you're going to be excited, my funeral. Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, a month ago, I was at the memorial service. I spoke at my home church for my good friend, lifelong friend and mentor, Stanley Parnell. And I want to tell you, it was a great service. To be a memorial service, there was people there that 50 years ago, Stanley had made an impact on their life, and they were there and they spoke highly of him. It was a praise service. And so memorials and celebration of life, funeral, whatever you have, don't have to be sad or bad. I mean, they are some. But I want to tell some truths in a backward way by telling what I want for my funeral. The good news is my wife is here, my son and daughter are all here. So you make sure you get this video and you're ready for it whenever it happens. But I've been talking about mine, I want to also talk about yours. And I've subtitled this, We Face Death to Do Life Better. Now I know, the old people are thinking, that's too close, I don't want to talk about it. And the young people are thinking, that's too far away, I don't want to talk about it. But still, I think it's good for every once in a while, not to belabor this every day of our lives, but to think about it, to live wisely. That's what I want us to do, to think wisely. Now let me start with a couple of places in the Bible about funerals. Jacob was when you remember he went to Egypt, the whole family where Joseph was, and then he died there. So he instructed them, soon I will die and join my ancestors. Bury me with my father and my grandfather in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite. There were Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and my wife Leah, he said. And so when he'd finished his charge to his sons, he joined his ancestors in death. Jacob died. So Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. So he went, all his staff went, all his brothers, all their families, a big entourage, went back to Israel there to bury Jacob just as he had commanded them. They carried his body and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah near Mamre. I want one other verse about a funeral in Acts chapter 8 when Stephen the martyr was killed. It says this one verse, some devout men came and buried Stephen with great mourning. I heard a story, I wrote this, I jotted this down about 25 or 30 years ago when I heard this, a true story about a man who went out on a Saturday morning. He had a ham radio, and he went in his garage with his cup of coffee to play with a ham radio, and there was something come over, and I don't know much about ham radio, but there was something going on. He heard this older guy talking to a younger guy about marbles. He said, oh, let me listen to this. What's he talking about? And the younger guy was complaining he worked 60 to 70 hours a week, didn't get to spend much time with his family. So the older guy said, let me tell you a true story. Let me tell you what happened to me. When I was 55, I got to thinking about my life and how it was passing by. And he said, I figured out the average life is about 75. And he said, if you take 52, which is the number of weeks in a year, by 75, that's 3,900 weeks. And since Saturday's my favorite day, he said, I taught 3,900 Saturdays. And so he said, I went to the store and figured out, well, I'd already spent up about 55, so I had about 1,000 Saturdays left. So I bought 1,000 marbles. And it's a true story. He went and put them in a big glass container or plastic container he could see, put it in his garage. And he said, and every Saturday I go in there and I take one of the marbles and I throw it away. He said, the diminishing number of marbles helps me to focus on what is important in life. Not to be morbid about it, but to realize I only have so much time to spend with my wife and children and others and do what I want to do. And he said, I hope this will help you to focus on what's important. He said, by the way, one more thing before I get off. This morning, I took my last marble out. If I lived the next Saturday, it'll be extra time the Lord gave me. He said, the man listening to this, he just said, well, you could have heard a pin drop. Everybody got quiet on the ham radio. And he said, I was going to fiddle around with my radio and build an antenna. He said, I went up and I said to my wife, wake up, honey, I'm going to take you and the kids out to breakfast. She said, what brought this on? Oh, I don't know. I just thought we hadn't spent much time together lately. And by the way, can we stop at the toy store and buy some marbles? Because he wanted to do that too. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that, but what we all need to realize is we have a limited time. Let's be wise. We don't have so much time to be fighting all the time. And arguing all the time. And hurting each other all the time, like we do. We think we've got all the time in the world to someday make it right. Now's the time to make it right. Now's the time to treat each other right. Now's the time to get along and love each other and do good and be good for God and for others and love them. Now's the time. Because we don't know how much time we have left. We may not even have 3,900 Saturdays. So I want us to think about facing death so we can do better for life. Now, I haven't heard bad news from the doctor. So I'm not saying I'm getting up here and telling you about my funeral because I know I'm going to go tomorrow. But on the other hand, I don't know that I'm not going to go tomorrow. I've done funerals for people in their 90s and people in their 20s. I'm glad I didn't have to do anything for any younger than that. But my point is, the people in their 20s weren't expecting that. And so we don't know. And we want to be ready at all times to live wisely. So let me tell you about some things I want. And so you can think about your life. Now, I did some thinking first about, and this is crazy, but should I be buried or cremated? Because now in America, about 50% are buried and 50% are cremated. And I've had people ask me what is right. And so I looked in the Bible and there's not much about it. I haven't found one place where anybody was cremated. And that's when Saul and his 3 sons were killed by the Philistines. They were hung on the wall of the Philistines to show disrespect to Saul and his sons. So Jewish men went at night, took their bodies down, and they didn't have time for anything else. They burned the bodies, buried the bones. That's the only cremation I see in the whole Bible. And so the point is this. The Bible does not tell us it's right or wrong. So I'm not going to tell you whether it's right or wrong. I think it's either way. It's your choice. It's certainly cheaper, which is why probably it's been growing in numbers. But I'll say this for my wife and my son and daughter-in-law here. I want to be buried. I'm going to try to leave enough money for the funeral, okay, if I don't leave any more than that. And but I want a cheap funeral. I don't want the most expensive casket. I want the cheapest one. Amen. Okay? Because I'm not trying to impress anybody with my casket. I'm done gone anyhow. And you don't have to impress your love for me with my casket. You impress your love for me now, which you do. And I think it's nice to have a nice house, but don't get a house to impress other people. What's the point of that? It's nice to have a nice car, but don't get a car just to impress somebody. It's nice to dress up nice, but not just to impress everybody how cool you are. You know, we do so much of our life to impress anybody. What for? Stanley did not have that much. My mentor, my friend. He had a little house in Aberdeen. He drove a car, Chrysler, because that's where he worked. But we weren't even worried about him impressing us. What happened was he impacted us. He spent time with us and cared for us and taught the truth and lived the example and lifted up Jesus. And he impacted countless people with his life. That is so much more important. Do you impact people with your life? Not do you impress them? Now, if I'm looking down from heaven, it'll please me if you say to the funeral director, my dad asked me to ask this question, do you have anything cheaper? And I'll be smiling. And if somebody comes along in an open casket viewing, because I want people to be able to say goodbye, and they say, that looks like the cheapest casket you can get. From heaven, I will be going, yes. But I ain't worried about impressing people with my casket. Okay? And you don't need to be worried about impressing whether you love me or not. I know you do. So I do want to be buried, but the cheapest funeral can get. But also, I want it to be a memorial service like a church service. Now, if it can be in a church building, I know we don't even meet in a church building. This building is our church, but you know what I'm saying. If it has to be somewhere else, that's all right. That's not a deal breaker, but I want it to be like a church service. Because the church has been one of the most important things in my life. Amen. And not just because I'm a preacher. We had my mother's funeral in the church because the church is one of the most important things in her life. And I think it should be for every Christian. And so, either way, I want it to be like a church service. I want some singing. Let's sing at my funeral. And at least, I don't know all what to sing, but at least I want everybody to sing Amazing Grace. Because that's the song they sang the day I got saved. And I want everybody to hear that again. And maybe you can get Don Francisco to sing He's Alive. If you can get him there. All right. But I do like it. I'm seeing more of this at funerals now. You have something to show that the person was alive. I like it now how they put pictures and slideshows. I think that's cool to remember somebody's life with the pictures of what they were when they were young. And we think a lot of times we look at old people and don't realize they were young at one time. They were a child. They were a teenager. They were people struggling to know if they were in love or not. They faced all these things. Think about that when you look at an older person. And think of these people that they did have a life. But I also am thinking about making a video. If I have time, I may make a video. Wouldn't that be something? And all of a sudden flash up there, hello, it's Richard here. Or, Dad, Papa. Good to see you. Hello from heaven. Thanks for coming to see me off. I'm doing good. And I know that someday I'll be here to welcome you when you come over where I am. I don't know when it's going to be, but until then, you serve Jesus. It's the best thing to do, and it is worth it. Keep on. I may make a video like that, and if I don't, show this. Okay. Because I do believe that. I do believe I will be in heaven alive, more alive than I've ever been, and will more than ever say, keep faithful to God. That's what matters. Have food after the service. You knew I was going to say that, didn't you? Because I do believe in eating meetings. And I think it's good when we eat together. That's what one of the things we did when we had the service a month ago. We all ate together, and it was so good to remember Stanley and talk about the good things with him and talk about the good things with each other. That's good. And have a piece of pizza in my memory. A Dr. Pepper and a double stuffed Oreo. But I think it's good for us to eat together. And, you don't have to be famous so that they announce you on the news. Richard Atwood died. That's not going to happen. But if I have a few people who care enough to grieve, if you have anybody who has a hole in their life because you're gone, you've achieved something good and grand in your life. Who cares if we're announced on our TV? Do some people going to miss you? That's what makes a difference. Well, I think it's all right to mourn and cry at funerals. I've mentioned 2 funerals. It says Joseph fell on his father and wept and kissed him. Because his dad was gone. He loved him. And when Stephen was carried, he said, well, that was just weak people. No, that was devout men who greatly mourned. Nothing wrong with mourning. Nothing wrong with grieving. Nothing wrong with being sad when we lose somebody we love. It's not unchristian to grieve. Now, we don't grieve as others that have no hope. We don't grieve with despair. We don't grieve with bitterness. But we grieve because they're gone. And we care for them. So it's all right to mourn and cry. And if some of the rest of you are here and happens to be, my wife and family are not crying, punch them a little bit. Guys, are you not shedding a tear? No, I'm shedding a tear. Let everybody know that I thought I had a wonderful life. Now, I whine every once in a while like some of us do, but I realize I have a lot more to be thankful for than I do to whine about. God has been good to me. And I've had a great life full of joy and happiness, and I'm thankful for it, and I want everybody to know that. Let's give comfort to the bereaved. Now, what are we going to give comfort with? Are we going to use the latest popular TV show? How about the bestseller fiction book? Maybe some new science book that's come out. Will any of those give us comfort? No, because they don't have anything to say to our real need of life and death and what's important. we have to go to the book of God. The Word of God. That's where we can go and get stuff that really matches the importance of this, of life and death and God and eternity. We have to go to the Word of God to get comfort for the bereaved. And make sure we use that and we speak that and let them know the Bible teaches that Richard is going somewhere else. Now, I sort of wish my daughter was here for now because I want to give a Lord of the Rings illustration. Anybody here besides me and see Lord of the Rings? A couple of you admit it. Thank you. I think it's one of the greatest books and greatest movies there is. I'll let you know who I am, by the way. Tolkien was a Christian man who witnessed to C.S. Lewis to help him become a Christian. We know the great things he did. But in the end of the book, Frodo and Bilbo, if you've seen it and you know who they were, they leave and all the other people are sad to see him and they hug him. But what do? They don't just die and end. They get on a ship to go somewhere else. And to me, that's the picture we need to understand of Christian death. It's not the end of existence. We're going somewhere else. And maybe it'd be good if we just got on the ship and traveled and waved as we went. We're going somewhere else. And when Richard gone, and if you're any of you here when they had my funeral, Richard didn't die and completely, his body died, but he went somewhere else. And understand that. That is what the truth of what the Christian book, the Christian life is about. That we go somewhere else. It's not the end of our existence. There is a heaven that God has prepared a place for us. And at my funeral, I want somebody to preach the gospel. Somebody to say there is a God who loved the world, that He sent His Son Jesus, that even though we were sinners, Christ died for us, and that we can be saved and forgiven and have a life that with purpose and go to heaven someday. If we don't preach the gospel, what's the use? Make sure the gospel's at my funeral. Amen. I also hope that my wife and children will have good things to say about me. If I need to slip you 20, Justin. They may say, I know it wasn't perfect, but at least he tried. He tried to do right. He tried to live for Jesus. And he loved us. Because I do. And why I'm saying that is not just for me. I'm saying that for you. For us. To think ahead. Will people have to make up stuff to say good about us? Well, he really watched a lot of TV. He really knew his sports. Is that the best they can say about us? Or they can say, he tried to live like God told him. He sure helped people. He loved me. He encouraged me. He was an encourager. Can they say these things about us? To have something real and true to say about us when we die. I want to have two reminders at my funeral. One, life on this earth is temporary. Moses wrote one psalm that we know of, Psalm 90. And he said this, teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. Sort of like the 3,900 Saturdays. To know my days are numbered. I don't know what the number is, but I know it's a finite number of days on this earth. Life on this earth is temporary. And if we know that, I'm not saying grow up every morning so this might be my last. I'm saying we just know that so we apply our hearts to wisdom in how we live. We want to do good someday. We want to walk with God someday. We want to do that thing, that ministry we feel like He wants us someday. We want to tell them we love them and we want to talk to them about God someday. And we don't know how many days we got. So now life on this earth is temporary. I don't know if any of you here are old enough to remember David Cassidy. He was a sort of a teeny bopper singer. And all the young girls loved him, and he was on the... And maybe Diane loved him too. I don't know. This was a while ago, and he was on the Partridge Family. Anybody? That's an old show. Anyhow, the point is this: when he died, I think it just a few years ago, his daughter said the last words he said. 67 years old, the lady that died. This were his last words. So much wasted time. So much wasted time. I don't know what exactly he was talking about. But I guess some of us also could say that. We don't know we only got this many, but someday, but so much wasted. Let's not have that at the end of our lives. Do what good we can, love we can, now. So, time on this earth is temporary, but I also want everybody to reminder there's more than life on this earth. It's not just this. There's more. I heard a song yesterday, ain't no grave can hold my body down. Grave ain't going to do it. Someday even your body will be resurrected. By the way, do you know what the word cemetery means? Sleeping place. It's the Greek word for sleeping place. Because when the Christians put them in a cemetery, they feel like the body is resting until it's resurrected. And that's why a burial and a funeral is a testimony. This body is here, but we're putting it in the cemetery, not that it's, we know it's still going to corrupt and decay, but someday we're going to have a new body. Amen. And so it's like I'm resting until my body is resurrected. And so, reminder, there is more than just life on this earth. And then I want to leave two things for my family and friends. I want to leave a good example. I read a funeral of a little girl that is sitting on her gravestone there. She was a child of whom her playmates could say, it was easier to be good when she was with us. Wow! Isn't that a great? Wow! It was easier to be good. Don't you want that? It's easier for people to love. It's easier for people to go to God. It's easier for people to be thankful. It's easier to be good when they're around you. Because your life is an example. And they see what's happening with you and God in your life. And they see your encouragement. It's just easier to be good when they're around you. I'm telling you, it's easier to be good when I'm around Sandy. Maybe I'll say something about her funeral. Which I was, we're both holding out for Jesus to come back, by the way. That's our hope. But if he doesn't, before we die, it's easier to be good. It's easier to be happy. It's easier to be thankful around my wife. And that's a good example. We want to give a good example to those around us. If you have children, they're still watching your life. Grandchildren, boy, don't young people today need some example and mentor and prayer in their lives? If ever they need it now. And we can be that person, praying every day for our family and for our friends. 100 years from now, 150 years from now, the one thing I want more than anything else is my family in heaven with me. My wife, my children, my grandchildren. And I want you there too. I want to see you there too, and I don't want to do anything, and God knows this is my heart. I don't want anything to hinder you from that walk that Jesus has for you, but only help you in that walk. Because I know reality of realities, it may not happen today, but someday all of us are going on that journey. Every single one of us. And I want you to be in heaven, and I want you to have a wonderful life, as I believe I've had. And I think all of us ought to leave a sure testimony. So many times when I've done funerals, pastor, they're not in church. They don't have a church. They don't have a pastor. Can you do the funeral? I said, yes. And I go and I talk to them and I say do you know anything about the spiritual background of the person, trying to understand before I do a funeral? And they say, well, I remember he went to church a couple times when he was a kid. I remember hearing her say she prayed for something one time. And they don't have a testimony. I don't really know, and I'm not saying I ever say I know anything about their heart. But they don't leave any kind of sure testimony that where their heart was, their belief was, that they're right with God and in heaven. One of the best things you can do is leave a sure testimony to your family that I know and whom I believe. I believe in Jesus and I'm following Him. And He promised me a place in heaven, and that's where I'm going. And your life shows that one of the best things you can do is give a sure testimony to those behind you. We need that. And do you have a sure testimony? Do people know that you are a follower of Jesus Christ? that no doubt where you stand and what would happen if you died. Do people know that? Please leave that for us. I leave you with 2 verses. Both from Jesus, both passages. Jesus told her, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never, ever die. Do you believe this, Mark? That's the question for us. Do we believe this? And then one more, Jesus said, don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. And trust also in me, Jesus said. There's more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? When everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you always will be with me where I am. Amen. Jesus promised. If you believe in Jesus, He promised that if you believed in Him, He was going to take you to heaven forever. We're on a journey. And someday this part of the journey is going to get cut off. We're going to continue the journey in that next step. But it's not the end. I want us to bow our heads right now, please. And I'm going to pray in a minute. And I want you to ask yourself, number one, do I know for sure that I am a Christian, that I am a follower of Jesus, that I am right with God, that I am going to heaven? Ask yourself that and be honest with yourself. You don't have to try to impress me or anybody else. This is too important for that. That you know that you are saved and going to heaven.